afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Northern Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Paul Wynne, Chairman of this committee. We are not expecting a fire drill today. In the event of an alarm sounding, please leave the building and gather at the front of the building. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being held live streamed and recorded. Could I also ask you to please ensure that mobile phones are switched off and ensure the volume on your laptop is muted. To ensure the members of this committee and all the points raised by the public speakers are properly heard, I must advise you that I will not tolerate any disruptive behaviour. This is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting, and if such behaviour takes place and persists, I will adjourn the meeting. Members should ensure that they are present throughout the meeting, as you cannot vote on any item if you've not heard all of the debate. Can members and officers introduce themselves each time before they speak, so those listening know who is speaking? I shall now ask members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves. So start with you, Gary, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Gary Burton, Viking Ward.
Ken.
Ted Clark, Basin Hill, and also Collins.
Nigel.
Nigel Hartung, Plan Division.
Joyce.
Councillor Joyce Barrow, St Oswald Division.
Steve.
Steve Davenport, St Martin, Dudleston, and Dudleston Heath Ward.
David.
David Vasmer, Councillor for Underdale Ward in Shrewsbury.
Vincent Lamanek.
Jeff Elmer, Urban Councillor.
Right.
Mike Isherwood, Councillor for Walthamstow Street West.
Thank you very much. Can you have to do now? Could you, please?
Kim Brown, solicitor.
Shannon Franklin, Technical Specialist Planning Officer.
And Philip Muller, New Principal Planner.
Shelley Davis, Committee Officer.
Thank you very much. Right, confirm the minutes from the meeting held on the 29th of March. A proposal, please. Thank you, Gary. Second, Vince. All those in favour? I shall abstain because I wasn't here.
Abstention.
That's abstention. Okay. Thank you. Public questions. Are there any non-received? Disclosure of any pecuniary interests. Are there any? Okay.
I think I'm still on, am I? Mr. Chairman, I apologise, but it's appropriate. The first item on the agenda, the wider ward that I'm involved in, the 3-member ward, includes that particular district, so I'll be taking no part in that whatsoever.
Would you want to speak or not?
No, I don't wish to speak. My colleague, my colleague Rosemary Dartnell, Councillor Dartnell, will also speak.
Okay, Ted. Right, before we go any further, I'll just let you know that item 6 on the agenda, the second item, has been withdrawn. Ted. So, it's not going to be a busy day for you, is it? Sorry, Ted. Right, so, good question time. Right, so we'll go to item 5, proposals of development, site north of London Road to Shrewsbury. Apologies, sorry. No. Oh, sorry, yeah, apologies. Mark Jones, Steve Davenport, substituting, Alex Wagner, Nigel Hartung, substitute. I apologise for that, I missed that. Okay, thank you, Kim. So now we'll move to item 5. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so I'm Shannon Franklin. I'm the Planning Officer dealing with this application. I'd like to say it's short, but it's a good application, so I've tried to keep it simple. The application before members is a hybrid application. Full planning permission is sought for 103 dwellings and outline planning permission is sought for 32 dwellings, which are self-built and custom-built dwellings. Permission for the road layout, drainage, public open space and infrastructure works is sought within the full planning permission element. Officers are recommending for approval of the scheme to be delegated to the Assistant Director, subject to the conditions included within Appendix 1 and the signing of an appropriate legal agreement securing the affordable housing on-site in perpetuity and provision of on-site public open space and its management in perpetuity. In terms of late representations, on the update sheet, officers have clarified the contents of the section 106 and that an additional condition regarding phasing of the development will be necessary. One further point to raise is that an additional comment from neighbours has been received and circulated to members via email. I'm just going to run through the 5 points that they raised very quickly. First of all, in terms of the extent of open countryside, that's going to be clarified in a slide in this presentation. Vehicle access, both Shropshire Highways and National Highways have reviewed the data and confirmed it's acceptable. The density and how we've calculated that is set out in the officer's report paragraph 6.1.9 and 6.1.10, and we consider the density to be acceptable. Amenity has been considered in detail at section 6.7 of the officer's report, and we will comment further in this presentation. The preferred layout that neighbours would like, with a different position for the internal road layout, is not something that would be supported by planning officers or by drainage or highways consultees. And in terms of the design and scale, the applicant has submitted design rationale, and planning officers have worked with the applicant throughout the design development, both at pre-app and full application stage, to achieve a policy compliant and acceptable scheme. So I'll now run through the plans with you. This first plan is the site location plan, and this shows the outline application areas are hatched in a sort of blue hatch there, and the rest of the site is subject to full planning permission. If I then switch on to the proposed site plan, it's the slight pink areas, slight brown areas, those are outline custom built and self-built dwellings, and the rest of the site is for full planning permission. This next plan is in relation to the sill phasing, which is that additional condition I mentioned. Phase 1 is all of the dwellings subject to full planning permission. Phase 2 is the some of the lower carbon dwellings and the public open space. They'll run concurrently, but for the purposes of the application, they're in 2 phases. And then each of the self-build and the custom build plots has been calculated as their own phase. This is purely from a sill liability perspective to enable them to submit their own reserve matters applications for their individual plot and deal with the sill liability themselves. Just to clarify, in terms of the sill liability in section 106, as per the late reps, the section 106 will secure the affordable housing and the public open space on site. However, you'll note in the comments from consultees, learning and skills and the clinical commissioning group have requested funds via section 106. Planning officers have confirmed with planning policy that the amount of sill payment, which is community infrastructure levy, is sufficient to cover both of those contributions. So it's the intention that learning and skills and clinical commissioning group will be covered by sill, but if for any reason they can't be during the section 106 negotiations, then we can put them in the section 106, but at the moment it's intended that they'll be provided by sill. The next slide, the area hatched red on this shows the areas of public open space compliant with MD2, which are contributing to the open space on site. This is just one of the landscaping plans. I'd just like to point out that in accordance with the housing sites allocation, a buffer to the northern boundary, shown in green and blue on these 2 plans, which is to the crematorium, is included. There's also a play area included, and this is again the landscaping plans coming around the east and southern boundaries. And then we'll move on to some of the housing types, and I'll go through these fairly quickly. This is the apartment block. This is the apartment block elevations and an artist's impression. This is house type 4B and a couple of examples of that house type found in the site. House type 3E, again, there's some slight variations across the site in the house type. This is house type 2D, which is apartments, so 2 on the ground floor, 2 on the first floor. Just to point out that the internal layout of this particular house type has been changed in reference to comments made by neighbouring residents. Again, an artist impression of those different house types as to how they might look in a street scene. This is an example of the 3-storey house types. Again, another example of a 3-storey house type, and then an impression of what they might look like within a street scene, and an example of a couple of bungalow types on the site. These are street scenes. I've just popped these on to highlight the continuity of certain design features, the bulking and the massing throughout the development. So the shaded ones are the custom build and self-build plots, which obviously we don't have the exact details for yet. And then there's one final one. So I'll just run through the site photos. These site photos are taken stood inside the site looking towards London Road and the rear boundaries of those residential properties which are accessed from London Road. You can see in the far background Shrewsbury Business Park on the top left photo, and the top right as well actually. And then these photos are looking towards the bottom two photos are of the northern boundary along the boundary to the crematorium, and the top two photos are towards the northwest corner, and then these photos are looking east southeast towards the road which is known as now called Pankhurst Way, but you will have heard referred to as Weir Hill Road in prior applications. I will refer to it as Pankhurst Way throughout this because that is what it is now called. And this is just a site in context, just to give members a bit of an idea of where the site is. So this is our application site. I'd like to pay key attention to where Pankhurst Way is, which links Weir Hill Farm residential development to the north here and London Road. We've then got the Thieves Lane, Jackie Land Rover commercial development and M Street Island to the southeast. Kingston Drive residential development is here, the cricket ground, M Street Crematorium and Cemetery, and then London Road campus, and obviously the remainder of Shrewsbury in this direction. So we then come on to policy context. So officers are recommending approval of the scheme on the basis that part of the site is an allocated housing site, which I've shown edged in red, shaded white-ish on this plan. And that the remaining portion of the land currently designated as open countryside, shown as blue in this plan, is an acceptable parcel of land for residential development. Officers are supporting the development partially within the open countryside, and as such, the application has been advertised as a departure as required. As set out in the officers' report, the primary reason for officers recommending for approval of development on this parcel of open countryside land is that the construction of Pankhurst Way, Weir Hill Road, since the adoption of the local plan, has formed a new logical boundary to the built development of Shrewsbury Town. The area of land currently in open countryside under the local plan is situated between an allocated housing site and an existing constructed road, and the proposal will fill the gap between these two existing forms of built development. As I've explained in the officers' report, we've also considered all the benefits of the application, which would add weight in favour of approval. These benefits include the mix and scale and tenure of housing, housing sizes, both open market and affordable, are of a scale which is needed within the area, and the self-build and custom build type of plot is again something that the council is required to provide a mechanism for provision of. We've also considered the sustainable location of the site, both the allocated and open countryside portion at the edge of Shrewsbury Town, within reach of services and transport links, as well as a slight biodiversity net gain. Officers consider when adding these weights in favour of approval together and balancing against the harm associated with developing the open countryside, taking into account the overall spatial position of the site and how the construction of Pankhurst Way has changed the policy context, that we can support the application and that the weight in favour of that approval is sufficient to outweigh any residual harm. I'll bring up the site plan again and I'll just run through some of the specifics that have come up during the application. The development provides a mix of properties from 1 to 4 bedrooms between 1 and 3 stories in height, and the residential dwellings subject to full planning permission are all designed to be low energy or carbon neutral homes constructed above the minimum building regulations requirements. The outline planning permission and the custom build and self-build plots will be governed by a plot passport and site-wide design code. The plot passport limits the footprints of those properties, the height, the position of driveways and services, etc. So whilst they will be differing in house types, there will still be a continuity through the site in terms of the scale of development and the finishes that they will have. And officers will have the opportunity to consider the specifics of each of the self-build and custom build plots at reserve matters stage. A number of comments that we made at pre-application stage about housing numbers, parking layouts, boundary treatments have all been taken on board by the developer and amended as part of this before this full application was submitted, so that we consider the scheme, albeit modern in style, to be acceptable in terms of scale, character and design. In terms of affordable housing, the site provides a policy compliant amount of 20% entirely on site, which equates to 27 units. These are 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom bungalows, 1 or 2-bedroom apartments and 2-bedroom houses. And the individual siting of those plots, which is pepper potted throughout the development, is supported by the Affordable Housing Consultee, and so is the type of tenure, which will be a mix of affordable rent and shared ownership. During the application, the primary issues arising relate to residential amenity and the impacts on the residents along London Road. So as you can see, the development wraps around the rear boundaries of these properties along London Road, and that's where the primary issues have come from. In terms of overlooking, officers accept that the introduction of neighbours to the rear will give a perception of overlooking, but we've looked at the siting of each individual dwelling and the distances from facing elevations, from shared boundaries, and their orientations in terms of angles of views into and out of sites is all acceptable and policy compliant. And the applicant has made additional changes over and above what we can actually require by policy to address some of those concerns wherever they've been able to. The shared boundary treatments, fencing, hedge planting, tree planting, again provides screening, and at no point have officers identified policy conflicts in terms of experience and development as overbearing. There are some 3-storey dwellings, and the apartment block is split up into 2 stories at the 2 ends and 3 stories in the central portion. But it's considered to be acceptable when taking into account its position on the site and the surrounding context of development and the scale and bulk of buildings such as those at Shrewsbury Business Park. The other concern of existing residents was to do with existing electric and drainage supplies, but the applicants have confirmed that they intend to connect those properties to mains drainage and underground electric with agreement with the residents, and officers are satisfied that services can be maintained to all existing properties. Just nipping on to public open space, the application provides 12,240 metres squared of policy compliant public open space, as well as some additional green spaces on the site. This is not only policy compliant, it's an over provision of on-site public open space, therefore weighing in favour of approval. The landscaping scheme across the site includes a variety of planting types and has been encouraged by officers and the ecology team from pre-application stage through to this full planning application to ensure wherever possible natural boundary treatments are utilised to improve the overall character and visual appearance of the development from all existing and resultant public viewpoints. And finally, National Highways have been contacted with regards to the potential impacts upon the A5 roundabout, and they've confirmed that the scheme and the data used to assess it is acceptable. Similarly, Shropshire Council Highways Consultee have confirmed that on a local level, the internal site layout, parking provision and connection to Pankhurst Way and London Road is acceptable, and all the other consultees involved in the application raised no objection to the scheme. To conclude, officers have considered the specifics of the development and the comments of the consultees and concluded the details of the schemes is acceptable. Whilst we acknowledge part of the site is in open countryside, since the adoption of the local plan, the policy context and the spatial context of the site has altered significantly with the addition of Pankhurst Way, such that we consider the site's logical boundary to be formed by this existing built development. In addition, the benefits associated with the application that I've highlighted outweigh the residual harm associated with that partial development lying within the countryside. Officers are therefore requesting that the committee resolve to approve the application, delegating authority to the Assistant Director such that officers can prepare the Section 106 and amend the wording, but not the effect of any conditions where it's deemed necessary. Okay.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Phew, everyone drink water, those two.
It's a really big application.
Before I go any further, hang on, Margie. Edward's come in late, unfortunately. How the rules like, you will pick me if I'm wrong. You haven't heard all the debates, I'm afraid you can't fit in, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And the next bad news, Edward, the second application has been withdrawn. Yeah.
Chair, can I
I'd like to sit down and listen, by all means, but can't partake, I'm afraid.
Chair?
Yeah.
Just, and perhaps Kim will correct me if I'm wrong, the debate hasn't actually started yet, and the presentation is pretty well much what we've got in the papers anyway.
Yeah,
So it's not missed any of the debate.
That's just the rules we've got in place, and the fact that Shannon read out the letter of objection and addressed those points, I feel that it would be unfair.
I've forgotten that really letter.
Good thought.
Yeah.
Before, we're not going to, we've got a speaker yet, night, so is that okay?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask questions of the officer.
Okay, fine. We'll leave that for now. Thank you. Right, before we go any further, we have a local member speaking on it. So Rosemary, you're online or something. We've not done this before, it's a first in an open meeting, but good luck.
Thank you very
You
much.
have 5 minutes, okay?
Thank you. I'm Rosemary Dartnell, local member for Bayston Hill, Colham and Sutton. I'm supportive of this application because of what it delivers for Shropshire. So firstly, the land in question broadly has long been allocated for development, previously for self-build homes, and the council's obligation to government for self-build will be met if this proposal gets a green light. In the face of the climate emergency, this development represents a first step towards environmentally sound construction, including some passive house standard homes, heating via air source heat pump and insulation appropriate to this style of heating. 3, the mix of homes directly addresses housing need, including as it does 1 and 2 bed homes, walk-up flats, the low-rise apartment block and bungalows, all of which are in demand but not generally delivered via construction, e.g. in the South Sustainable Urban Extension thus far. 4, the delivery of the correct percentage of affordable homes is a positive, and after all, this was the main driver for Shropshire Council establishing CDL in the first place. So existing residents next to the proposed development have expressed concerns, some of which have been resolved by cooperation between the planning officer, CDL and myself on their behalf, and I thank all parties for this. The residents live just beyond the town's edge at the moment, and they will lose privacy if this development goes ahead. CDL has undertaken to continue work with residents to resolve services issues beyond this meeting today, hopefully for them beyond approval, permission being granted, for connection to new services once they're developed. And one can easily imagine that the living circumstances for those residents will be forever changed by this development as it extends the town boundary to include their homes and just beyond. However, I have some concerns for the impact of the development itself and the surrounding areas of Colham and Sutton, which have themselves been forever changed by many hundreds of new homes in the last few years, added in the last few years. The proposed application adds 135 homes to the 600 already under construction in the erstwhile green wedge between London Road and Preston Street, so a total of 735 new homes, or 1,800 new residents. Just around the corner, along Otley Road to Meal Brace, even more new homes will have been completed by the time this development concludes. Yet little has been done to ease traffic pressure in Colham and Sutton and provide safe, active travel routes for thousands of residents to get to work, to school, to do their shopping, attend appointments, and if this were not enough, bus provision in Shropshire is under threat. We have an obligation to ensure traffic is safely managed, but also to avoid car dependency, a singular failure of the estates newly built in Colham and Sutton. Incentivising active travel is paramount in achieving decarbonisation, but it also has the capacity to improve public health, both physically and mentally. Pankhurst Way remains closed to Weir Hill residents. It's closed to all public, actually, in the 230 plus homes occupied thus far, and go via Preston Street. Along with construction traffic, this has delivered traffic chaos onto these roads, Preston Street I'm really talking about, for the last 3 years. This will change when Pankhurst Way opens. A large number will surely use the London Road junction on a frequent basis. The impact on the junction will be from 735 homes, not 135 therefore. I ask for the following to be provided by SIL or S106 as appropriate. So to provide a safe walking / cycling route for families and children from the development to educational facilities at Mearside Primary by the construction of 2 crossings, the first on London Road by the new frontages and the second on Wenlock Road. Make the roads around Mearside Primary safe, currently extremely dangerous for children arriving and leaving school near Mrs. Common, Shropshire Council identifies Mearside as a growth school. It has pupils from new Weir Hill homes already who have no choice but to come by car, as although the distance is easily walkable, there is no walking or cycling route available. Number 3, confirm that Pankhurst Way itself will open once phase 2 Weir Hill is complete. This development, the new development proposed here, I hope will not impact on this opening. 4, ensure that LTN 120 compliant separate walking and cycling carriageways within the proposed estate are made. 5, assess the Pankhurst Way London Road junction, including Weir Hill predicted traffic. Surely a controlled junction is required here, particularly when we consider traffic turning right either onto or from London Road.
Rosemary, I'm sorry, you've had your 5 minutes, I'm afraid.
May I just finish the very last point?
Right.
Thank you. Number 6, entry to Scout has a 40-mile-an-hour limit, far too fast for the sudden rise in traffic that will occur. Please reduce the speed in all of London Road to 30 miles an hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Nearly well timed. Well done.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm up to the floor now. Nigel's indicated already. Then Vince. Okay, so maybe ask some questions. Right? Or would you like to answer some questions from Rosemary?
Yes, I think you agree with you.
So,
If it's okay with you, Chair, I'd just like to address the points that Rosemary raised
Yeah,
first,
certainly,
and then
certainly.
I think it
It
might.
might,
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go through some of the points that Rosemary made. First of all, in terms of when Pankhurst Way is going to be open, Pankhurst Way is not yet adopted, but the agreement associated with that is under the process of being adopted. And my meetings between Shropshire Council Highways, the developer for this application site, and this application site, that is forthcoming. It will be open before this development site was ever to be occupied. The timeframes are far ahead of that as such. I don't have an exact date, but it will be open before this site. In terms of the consideration of the junction between Pankhurst Way and London Road and this development, the data that has been included within the transport assessment for the 135 houses on this site joining Pankhurst Way and then connecting to London Road, that has also taken into account residual traffic movements associated with the Weir Hill development at the top. That is something that both Shropshire Council Highways and National Highways were aware of when they have assessed the information submitted. So the data for all of the houses, the 735 that Rosemary referred to, has already been considered by both of those consultees. In terms of internally, the site does have pedestrian and cycle connectivity between the site and London Road. There is a pedestrian cycle route through each of these, through this section here and this section here, and then around the site perimeter there is a designated pedestrian cycle footpath which is included within part of the landscaping theme, so the residents of this specific site can navigate around that. And in terms of the comments regarding reducing the speed from M Street Island down to the colleges, at the moment it's 40 miles per hour. Rosemary's request that it goes down to 30. That is something that has been included within one of the transport assessments submitted as part of this site. In order to get an approval for a reduction in speed, it is a process that goes through consultation with the parish, with Shropshire Council Highways, as well as with the police. So that is something that will be ongoing after the development. It's not something that's conditioned as part of the development, but it is part of the transport improvements packages that are under consideration. And that would be something that we would be intending to, that they are intending to explore and seek to achieve anyway. Part of that also comes from creating what's known as an active frontage. So that, for example, the street lighting is being introduced, additional driveways being introduced, and changing the boundaries which are currently to hedging, again, all contributes to passively encouraging drivers to reduce their speed, which then supports the reduction of the official speed from 40 to 30. So I hope that clarifies that. In terms of safe walking and cycling to Mearside, obviously I can't comment on the Weir Hill development because I personally wasn't the officer that dealt with that. Obviously I've highlighted where this site has existing connections to the highways network for pedestrians, cyclists and obviously by vehicle. The sill pavement associated with the site would be expected to cover some of those facilities as well. I think that's everything that Rosemary said. I'll be quiet and I'll let you come ask your question.
Thank you, Sharon. Rosemary, I'll just let you come back if you've got any questions now before I open it up to the floor. Are you happy with all the responses you got then?
Yes, I am. Thank you. I mean, I do have doubts about the traffic survey and the lack of a controlled junction, because I think that the amount of traffic coming from, you know, my non-professional, if you like, valuation of the 735 new homes tipping out onto London Road from those combined developments, let's say, I think will create quite a problem, particularly that the right turns involved. But you know, I'm not a transport expert, but it's just commonsensical to me that seems like it's not sufficient just to have a normal junction there. But I guess we'll see in time. But yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Right, now on to the floor. Nigel first.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, for a very comprehensive presentation. Thank you. The only question that flows from that really is that I note that within the report there have been changes on site to ensure compliance with policy CS11 in terms of the pepper potting of the affordable housing. I just wasn't quite clear from the report or what you said precisely where within the site the pepper potting actually is.
Thank you. I was going to ask that.
Yeah, so because of the scale of the plan, it's slightly hard to see, but I will roughly highlight. So there are, if they've got a little star on, then they are affordable. So there's affordables here, here, here. We've got some here, and then there's some down. Then we've got some here. So essentially, within the blue shaded housing, there are 27 affordable properties dotted throughout them. So what we've sought to make sure is that they're not all in one area of the site. They are spread all across this southern area. Some are accessed from London Road and some are accessed from within the site. So as I say, because of the scale, it's slightly hard to see, but there are some in this corner, some here, and here.
Yeah. Right, Vince.
Thanks, I wasn't going to say a lot. I know from earlier applications, I guess some people are aware of the fact that I'm not necessarily a huge fan of green open space or open space being used. But I have to say I'm surprised that it is considered open space with the boundary of the London Road there. It seems to me a bit, well, to me that would be a natural boundary. But I'd also like to comment that I can see that a lot of the green open area for use by residents is within that. Within the picture that Sharon showed us. So I'm not particularly anti this on those grounds for a change. Officers will be pleased to hear.
Thank you, Chairman. Karen Burchett, Bagley Division. First question is the Elm Street crematorium. Has any thought been given to the need for expansion of the crematorium at a later date? Truth is growing at a rapid rate of knots, and as far as I'm concerned right now, that's our only current available graveyard. So where's the expansion for the crematorium going to take place? And the second question is regarding the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit that Rosemary brought up. Before Lotley Road was developed, they changed the 60-mile-an-hour road to the 30-mile-an-hour road in anticipation of all the housing that was being developed. So why is this development being allowed to progress with the 40-mile speed limit still in place when it's a large development in total 650 houses, 700 houses? Why hasn't the consideration of 30 miles an hour been done as part of the development process?
Thank you. Would you like to come back on that now, or would you like to?
Yes.
Would you like to? Yeah. Okay, Shannon.
In terms of the Elm Street crematorium expansion, obviously I can't comment exactly. This site would form, it's its southern boundary, there is still additional space. If I flick back to this plan, so our site boundary comes along here, so you can see the turning head to Emstree Crematorium. There is still space between the existing boundary of the crematorium here and Pankhurst Way for potential expansion. That's not to say that officers would support it, but just to say this site isn't tied to every boundary of Emstree Crematorium. That's all I can really comment on that. And then in terms of the approach taken to the speed limits on Otley Road, again, it's a slightly high level comment in that I wasn't the planning officer for Otley Road. Obviously, the reduction in the speed limit from 60 to 40 or 60 to 30 along that strip, I think you said, it's a greater reduction. So demonstrating the need to go from 60 to 40 in apprehension of a future development is more justifiable than going from 40 to 30 when the development hasn't happened yet, is my understanding of the approach taken. So as I say, the change in speed limit is something that is being pursued as part of the application and the highways improvements alongside it. Part of that requires the creation of the active frontage, the introduction of driveways, changing in hedges and things like that.
The issue with regards to reduction in speed limit will obviously also be a matter for the town council and the police and the relevant groups to look at, if necessary, as and when appropriate. Like the housing scheme itself isn't been implemented yet, but if at a later date there's enough evidence, will they look at it on its merits as with the case before them?
Thank you. David.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just picking up that last point, actually. I mean, the section in the report is a bit vague and woolly, saying that it's recommended, therefore, this matter is further discussed with the applicant to assess the suitability and potential compliance with a 30-mile speed limit. Could that be? I mean, that seems a bit woolly to me, and it seems that we ought to be much more, given the policies of the council for active travel and safe travel, we ought to be much more definite about that. That's about another point as well.
Yeah. We, as the planning officer, cannot require a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit on the road because we don't have the power to implement it. We can, obviously, we assess the transport impacts on the scenario at the moment, and we assess those improvements that the applicant are proposing. That's what we've done here. It's acceptable on the scenario at the moment, and if those improvements are put in place, it will be an even better scenario. The reason we can't make them put a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit in is because A, the police have to be consulted, B, the parish council have to be consulted, and it's a highways transport regulation order outside the planning remit. So we, as planning, encourage and support wherever we can. For example, requiring active frontages as part of developments and making, the developer will have to provide the street lighting in this instance, which again contributes to the likelihood of the successful traffic regulation order to reduce the speed limit. We can't make them, but we do everything in our power to make that process easy for them when they get to that point. I hope that helps.
It's beyond the applicants, really.
Right.
Can I just check one other point? Thanks. Just picking up what Councillor Dartnell was saying about active travel. Obviously, there's good provision within the site, but obviously it would be useful to actually enable people to actually continue their journeys safely beyond that to local facilities such as the school that Councillor Dartnell referred to. But is it possible for that to be funded through SIL payments?
So SIL payment would cover any infrastructure. So it includes an aspect of funding going towards pedestrian routes and cycleways. I can't tell you exactly how much because it's all done on a ratio depending on the development size. In terms of inside the site itself, each of these properties has an electric car hookup point. Each of these properties has storage for a cycle provision, and then internally, as I've highlighted, there are pedestrian and cycle routes. Pankhurst Way has provision for a cycle lane on it, I believe, from my discussions with our council department. So those links are there, and the SIL, as I would be intended to be used for that wider connectivity, as you say, to other facilities within the area.
Okay, Steve?
Mine's general, really. We said many years ago that with all the house building going on throughout the country and county, we really, as Gary said, alluded to the infrastructure. I mean, this is a general comment. In my area, and lots of other areas, we're now struggling with doctor surgeries, lack of them, but timing, school placement, road infrastructure. What form of the planning applications does actually, apart from 106 and silt payments, does this address in the future? Because it really is now getting serious.
Obviously, the scale of the development generates a need for a financial contribution to provide for those things. For example, the health one, the CCG have requested £87,000. The silt payment generated by this development is near £500,000. So there's sufficient money to completely cover that contribution, and that's
if it gets spent.
the way that silt is recuperated and spent is outside the control of us as a planning officer. But we can tell you that the development complies. We can tell you that everything that it needs to pay for, there is sufficient money in the pot as such to pay for that.
Vince?
Thanks. I think we're in danger if we're not careful of forgetting that what we're here to do is discuss the site that's in front of us. All the nice bits that we would like added to that are actually not within the gift of the applicant and not within the gift of the planning department. We can only deal with what's inside that red line. I think that what's inside the red line has taken on active travel. They've thought and worked with the local community to try and build the best thing they can. They put in an awful lot of resource in. I mean, none of them will be passive house because they're just to get that title, it's really expensive, but they build them to top quality, which is equivalent to pretty well much to passive house. I think they've got all the green open space. Yes, it would be nice wherever there's a school. We're supposed to be putting in a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit anyway, but that's not within the remit of this committee. Cycleways on the roads outside are not within the remit of this committee. We did hear, but they're outside the site. What's inside the site has been, they've taken it on board. The CCG have requested some still money to cope with the scale of this development, and they've been told that they will have it. Has education, and they've been told they can have it unless something goes wrong, but it shouldn't in theory, and if it did, then they would just get it. That was part of the presentation. We need to concentrate with what's there, and what's there are good quality homes, a good quality design, with as we say, active transport within the site, which is the only bit over which planning officers and the developers have control. Personally, I think I'm going to recommend the officers' recommendations.
Thank you. One more indicating Mike, you'd like to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think this development does have a lot of features to commend it, but as always, when it's Cornovia, I feel the need to point out that, you know, we should be building to zero carbon standards right now. The sustainability checklist in the plans is incomplete. The energy demand and efficiency statement hasn't been properly filled in. The tick boxes are for minimum standards in water consumption and waste generation. The photovoltaics, it's saying 1.8 kilowatts per unit. Well, that seems pretty low when the majority of the cost of installing solar panels is the installation, not the actual panels themselves. So we could be including a lot more at the point of building, and with only 15 homes actually at the sort of zero carbon level. I think that's quite a low percentage, and they won't be the affordable homes, and it's the people who will be living in those properties that would benefit most from the most efficiently built properties. So I think that, you know, that should be turned on its head really, and it should be the affordable homes that have the highest standards. So I know it won't make a difference. I know, you know, we can't really demand those standards at this committee. They are although owned by the council, they're an independent company. But I just would want to again make the point that I think they should be building to much higher standards, zero carbon now.
Thank you, Mike. I think all we can do with that is note it, to be honest. It's a very good point. I think it's extended thing, but it's not law. But we'll note that. Thank you, Mike. Nigel.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I've lost with a lot of what's just been said in terms of the issue that was been highlighted has been brought up by some of the objections as well in terms of the lack of certain levels of energy efficiency. And my question really was, this application has been moving forward for a little while now, and things have got significantly worse in terms of the short to medium term, even future for energy consumption across the piece. I'm just wondering whether or not the applicant has done enough in the officer's views to be able to take on board, particularly in relation to the affordable homes, the massive increase in energy costs, which we're all going to be suffering, but which, as Mike quite rightly points out, is going to fall most heavily on those who can least afford it.
I can very briefly comment on that. In terms of sustainability, we can only require the developer to comply with our current sustainability policy. They do, and they happen to go above that on all of the homes on this site. They go above in terms of thermal efficiency on building regulations. They comply with building regulations, a few steps above that. In our emerging policy, everyone will have to comply with that building regulation standard, but this developer is complying with it now. It is above and beyond. It's not perfect because it's not zero carbon all round, but it's above and beyond what every other developer has to provide, and I dare say what they do. That's for the committee to ponder.
Yeah. We are an example, obviously, we're involved with it, but they have gone and beyond. But I think very good points made by both. I've got a proposer. Thank you, Gary. I have a proposer and seconder. Any more comments from anybody? Okay, so show of hands, all those in favour.
We're doing a
Sorry?
individual.
Oh, we have to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got to do it individually. For the purpose of, I can't remember, but some good purpose. Okay.
So we've got a proposer and a seconder to accept the officer's recommendation. So if you could just indicate whether you're voting for or against, please. Councillor Barry?
For.
Councillor Burchett?
For.
Councillor Davenport?
For.
Councillor Elmer?
For.
Councillor Harton?
For.
Councillor Hunt?
For.
Councillor Isherwood?
For.
Councillor Vasma?
For.
And Councillor Wynn.
For.
Okay, so that's unanimous.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Going on to the agenda, before we go on to the, where are we? I've got it somewhere.
I'll skip through the some markings on.
Item 6 has been obviously withdrawn. So appeals and decisions. Any comments on appeals decisions? Philip?
No, they've all been dismissed except for one, which was allowed for extension
Okay.
to dwelling. I must admit I'm a bit of a loss as to why it was allowed, but hey ho, that was the inspector's decision. I happen to, so I've nothing to comment at this stage.
Right, I've just got one comment to make. Unfortunately, we've had a resignation from one of our planning officers, up and coming, and she happens to be sitting on my right hand. Shannon has given notice, unfortunately, whatever she's going to do with herself. I believe you're going travelling a bit, and hopefully see you back after your travelling and see you back in that chair. But thank you very much and good luck. Thank you very much. And the date of the next meeting is on Tuesday, 24th of May. Great, that's my wife's birthday.
Yay!
We got this.
Hey,
With you.
thank you very much. I'm in trouble. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. I'll close the meeting. Thank you.